Good afternoon, Professor Joy. My name is Ronke Olawale. I'm of the University of Michigan, and I'm inviting you to participate in our Global Feminism Project, a program that is meant to gather, the oral histories of women, activists and feminists from all over the world. Indeed, we're interested in women who have focused a lot on important issues that impact or affect women and gender in our world. And so I would like to start out by asking you to introduce yourself. What's your name? And please do me the favor of spelling it, and thereafter I will also want to understand how you want me to address you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ronke, and welcome to Nigeria. And I'm glad that your institution is doing this very important work of recording women and their stories. My name is Joy Ngozi Ezeilo. Joy is my first name, and Ngozi is my middle name as an Igbo woman. And then my last name is Ezeilo, and I'll spell that Joy, Joy, Ngozi, Ngozi, and Ezeilo, Ezilo, and that's my last name. I'm a law professor, so you can call me Professor Joy Ezeilo. I'm fine by it. You can call me Joy Ezeilo. I'm also fine by that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. And I would like to start out by asking you to tell me a little about your life, and specifically as you think about where you are today, how will you depict the journey that brought you to this point?
I would say my journey, simply put, is a journey from local to global. Okay. From being a local activist scholar to becoming, doing work in the global work that I've done and I continue to do around the world. I started very early in my life, and then my first what really made me to decide to go on the path of activism or to defend women's rights and to defend also the broader human rights issues was my experience as a teenager when my father died, and we were living in city, and I wasn't really exposed much to culture and including cultural differences and gender discrimination and stereotypes and the different treatment they give to women, whether as widows and then that different from the men as widowers. So we traveled to the village. And that was when I started seeing all kinds of widowhood rights they were expecting my mom to do, including waking her up, asking her to cry, to let out, and I'm like, what is this? Why do you have to do that? I was already already in the senior secondary school. And I said, why is that? That's when I noticed the gender differences. And they said that's part of the mourning practices. And they made us stay 2 months plus in the village. And my mother ended up spending a year in the village, and then you have to wear mourning clothes for like 1 or 2 years. So those things made me, and immediately I decided I'm going to be a lawyer. For me, that was that would give me the voice, to become the mouthpiece, to become the advocate, to become the defender of human rights. And then I decided, and that was it. And that's how I went to read law. And then immediately out of law school, I did not waste even any single time. I immediately went into doing pro bono work, for different organizations. They've also formed and pioneered quite a number. And I've always seen the need to ensure access to justice. That's one of the areas where we have greatest gap in terms of women's rights. We can all advocate for rights, but if women are not actualizing, including those rights that are in written status, then it will be meaningless, and until they're able to enforce it, whether the court, and then they're able to, you can say now they have a remedy if their right is violated.
I see that you began to talk already about the connection between your work and your life. Mm-hmm. How would you really, expatiate on that. You know, how has your life experiences, or have your life experiences impacted your work life?
Yeah. So like I said, my first the starter, the push, you know, to this work was the experience of my mom. But of course, when I finished law school, even as in this law school, I was already demonstrating that leadership by taking positions in all the, you know, student association and being very active. But then I didn't lose sight of my passion, because immediately after law school, it was like I liked the corporate world. I started to do sort of corporate law, representing banks, but I said, no, this is not my passion. I quickly also realized, you know, that passion, it was still burning, and I said, no, I can't do this and do this corporate practice and still want to be this human rights lawyer. So I immediately, you know, abandoned that, and then went into academics as well. And it was easy for me, because when you come top of your class, and it's easier for everybody want to get you back to campus, you know, get you back to teach. So that was how also I started out, you know, teaching and being in the university, and being a scholar also enabled me to blend those two worlds, and especially to engage in type of scholarship that leads to social transformation. Okay. So it was, it became really a complete, very complementary, you know, to my work, my activism, my scholarship, and then through my scholarship, I could write, you know, from my experiences in activism. You know, About Women in Nigeria was like the first feminist organization in Nigeria. I became the Enugu State Coordinator, and I became also the National Publicity Secretary of WIN at some point. These are over 20 years ago. So it also gave me that, you know, that opportunity to further, and I was involved with International Federation of Women Lawyers. Even I was also the Publicity Secretary, and we did a lot of work prior to Beijing. And then during Beijing, in terms of getting the message, mobilizing women for even the pre-Beijing conference for Africa that took place in Dakar in 1994. So, and I remember going to villages and talking to women that there's going to be this very big Beijing conference. You know, what do you want us to say there? What do you want us to take to the African regional conference ahead of that? So it was, so from there, Women in Nigeria, to my work at FIDA, I felt there was still a gap with regard to women's rights. Women's rights was still emerging in Nigeria. Not that we haven't had women's movement and champions and mentors like Professor Awe, who have been, you know, Women and History, the first African woman who went to Oxford, who studied this and had her PhD, and we had Professor Jadishala Konde. You know, these were like pioneers. I recall when I was at the Gender Institute, and I guess we are the first set to be at the Gender Institute in Dakar. Professor Jadishala Akonde came then to talk to us in 1995 or 94. And then I told her what I was writing. She said, look, that is good. You know, it's good to have do your scholarship around this area. I said, yes, I already found my scholarship there. My LLM was on human rights and public international law at the University of London. My PhD work was also on human rights and criminal justice system. That then I've you know, armed myself in terms of legal scholarship, and then also scholarship around women's rights and women's movement. So, and I'm also practicing and doing that. So they have been, it's been really, so there have been women, you know, there in Nigeria who have been part of this women's movement, but we had a lot of gaps that I felt that there wasn't an organization addressing squarely the issue of women's access to justice, and then the issue of women's reproductive health rights. And I recall also when Professor Awe was in Ibadan, and then the MacArthur Foundation coordinator, that was when they were calling for, there is what they call a leadership award, and I think it's MacArthur Fund for Leadership. So I recall writing a proposal, one, to research sexual and reproductive health rights, and then also to be able to provide free legal aid to women whose rights have been violated, especially sexual and reproductive health rights. So I did that study around that, around right to health care, safe motherhood, rape, you know, abortion, and then women's body. And so after that, I got that award. It was like $75,000 in 1998. It was a lot of money too, but then people usually, when they have it, you do the research, and then they said, oh, what else? And then, of course, you're supposed to be a leader, so they give you the opportunity, say you take this $25,000 every year for 3 years, and then do the research, make your intervention. So I said this was an opportunity. In 1998, when I got this, it enabled me to I already have put on paper and concept note of a women's organization. I pioneered that Women's Aid Collective that I founded, and then it helped me to ensure that this organization, in terms of its mandate and objective, took off. So, and with that, we started immediately to provide that free legal aid. I saw that there was need for shelter. Women didn't have shelter in Nigeria, so by 2001, I built the first shelter, built, not rented. By 1998, we were ready in a rented shelter place. By 2001, I've mobilized enough resources and built the first ultra-modern shelter for women whose rights have, especially women who, at the peak of crisis, needed a safe place. So it's like safe house, to stay. And then, so from WACOL, I'll use the acronym WACOL. WACOL is a Women's Aid Collective. Was the organization I founded in 1997, and it started running shelter in 1998, providing free legal aid, and then with the funding I got from MacArthur Foundation, it became like also a seed grant that enabled that organization to take the formative research I'd done in the area of sexual and reproductive health rights of women and girls, and then also to use that to begin to address some of the findings and provide succor and then also avenues for redress, and then for redress and empowerment of women, whether as victims or survivors. So meanwhile, my academic work continued, and all my writings are really addressing different subjects, around women, children. But what I consider a landmark in my work, for which my activism influence, was starting a course, teaching a course on women, children, and the law. Okay. It was to be just solely a women's course, women's rights, women and the law. But then, given the patriarchy and patriarchal system that we have to navigate or bargain, they didn't, they are like, oh, no, you can't teach that. And then take children's law as well. So I had to take women, children. In fact, they even added illiterate. So I said, if only that will get me approval. Yeah, they said, no, the argument was take all the vulnerable groups. Okay, if you say that women are vulnerable and you wanted to study women, then you can also take all the vulnerable group. Why don't you take children? Why don't you take illiterate? Illiteracy under the law, we normally study it under evidence. So illiterate, how do you do illiterate protection? Because being an illiterate and then having all the legal issues was a major thing in law. But then it's already covered under evidence law. They said, okay, take the illiterate as well. You can't talk of protection of women, protection of children, protection of illiterate. So we kind of, I said, now between the devil and the WC, but it wasn't a hard choice to make. Important thing is that we needed to break new grounds. We needed to pay particular attention in our curriculum on the subject. And if this was going to be a way to start teaching, of paying particular attention to teaching that affect a particular group of people, why not? So I took it up, and then we changed the course title in a few years. It's still Women, Children, and the Law. And that was also adopted as by the National Universities Commission. So from 1997, I pioneered, and my faculty, the Faculty of Law, University of Nigeria, and the University of Nigeria is also the indigenous university, and the Faculty of Law is the first and the oldest Faculty of Law in Nigeria, which was from 1960. So we started teaching it. I pioneered it since 1997, and you know what? We are still teaching it from day to date. It has not gone off the curriculum. Rather, it has, in fact, it's a very popular subject among students. So it's not like maybe in the West where you find that only women will go for women's courses. You have more men, and then everybody sign onto it. There is an elective course, but quite a number signs onto it, which is good. So that's one area that is an important achievement. I did also work on curriculum development for teaching of health law and reproductive rights. And we also got a few universities that teach it today, even with the women's law. Now, even UNILAG teaches gender and the law. Osun University, I get people every day, telling me that they've started this, they've started that. Now, I'm trying now to bring them together so we can look at curriculum of all those teaching gender and the law and see how to begin to develop. I've worked hard to develop local jurisprudence in this area, including on health law and reproductive rights. So that's also in the academic arena. And then I worked also introduce the teaching of human rights, even in my university, human rights law. So now we're not only teaching it at the level of postgraduate level for many years, but as undergraduate level, we didn't start until I became also the dean. I'm currently the dean of law at the University of Nigeria. And then I was able to change the curriculum to have that, and in the curriculum now we are teaching, and not just at the University of Nigeria, with other universities that are partners are also dealing with the issue of health law as well. So this is an area where scholarship, activism, helps. The fact that I'm an activist, I already, I'm seeing this firsthand. I'm witnessing it firsthand in the field, and I know areas where women that needs to be studied, and then where you need to equip future lawyers with the skills in order to be able to engage in law reforms and engage in the system, including the system that will provide real justice for women. Because if a lawyer is not equipped and doesn't know anything about human rights or women's rights, you don't expect the person, when they go to court or they have a case, to be able to represent the interests of their client, very well. So today I look back and I see my students, imagine from 1997 to date, who have passed through these courses. I see them in international organizations. I see them working all over the place, and they are quite fulfilled. They are also contributing a lot to society, and that's what I think is the power of education. That also, if I had been just an activist and I don't have opportunity and possibility of using that to transform my world, my society, my environment, and then also that leaves something that is more lasting. So I'm really fortunate to be in that special privileged position of blending two worlds in the work I do. And then so that's just an aspect of my work. Like I said, I have so much and so many things to share. And then very typical of women, we try to do too much, and then we take on too much, and then we juggle and multitask all the time. My other work, which I've done, is forming the foundation of WACOL. WACOL that I formed, that I told you, the first it was just formed to advance human rights of women and children, with paying particular attention to their status under the law and in practice, and to end gender discrimination, including gender-based violence. So at WACOL, we have done tremendous work, but what I'm very proud of is the work around providing free legal aid and assistance to women and girls. On the legal aid, I would say we have given over 50, last time it was about 55,000 women have benefited from our legal aid. And I really say, modestly speaking, I don't think any organization in Nigeria can boast of that work. And it's been consistent. It takes a lot. You don't always find funding for legal aid, but we keep trudging. And it's one area I said, even if it's my last cover, I have to take personally to ensure that we provide this assistance to women. We will continue to do that, because it is very, 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 very crucial. We've tried to also have a one-stop center. In 2005, we had an initiative that was supported by British High Commission, which we call a triangular kind of response, tripartite response system, where we had the legal, the medical, and then the police. So working with the police, the hospital, and then us providing legal aid. That was the tripartite system of response to women who are victims and survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. So we did this between 2005 and 6, and we were able to carry on after the project ended, not for a few years, but then we couldn't continue the medical. Then we continued providing legal aid and doing referrals, but the problem was that the hospitals weren't taking them, without any money, and when we had money, we were able to pay for that. But fortunately, in 2014, we started with DFID, a specialized one-stop center. Justice for All DFID partnered with WACOL, Women's Aid Collective, which I founded in 1997, and we started a specialized sexual assault referral center, and we called it TAMASAC. I named it TAMASAC. We're trying to find a code, something that wouldn't stigmatize women, and people wouldn't know when they say, oh, I'm going to TAMASAC. It wouldn't sound like, a place they report rape. They could be targeted. So, and I recall also we are religious people, and down in the eastern part of Nigeria where I come from, we do a lot of religious, we believe a lot in religion. So people read Bible, and Tama was the first woman to be raped in the Bible. So we said, okay, I put all of this together, and then made a few consultations and named it TAMASAC. So that initiative was, in that initiative, we partnered with Enugu State government. So they provided us a space, donated a space, we refurbished with the funding, we received generous funding, we received from DFID UK, British Aid, and then run by Justice for All program. So we were able to renovate a space. Basically, we got the government to also send in some staff on a secondment from Ministry of Health, Ministry of Gender, and Ministry of Justice. We had the police, we partnered with the police, and then WACOL had the staff. So we ran this project for nearly 3 years plus, and it was a huge success. But the whole idea was that we start TAMASAC is registered and a subsidiary of WACOL. Then at some point, government that is in the facility will take over and continue to provide for that in the budget. And I'm very, very happy and excited that has happened, because usually when you start, we cannot, even as non-governmental organization, replace government, and government must always have their obligation, state responsibility to protect right, to respect right, and to remedy any violation, and that includes gender budgeting and include budgeting for addressing issues affecting women and other vulnerable groups in society. When you talk about inclusion or inclusivity, that inclusion, leaving no one behind, means that also you plan for those who are not in a privileged position, or those who are most at risk in a community. So the TAMASAC were able to give hundreds, like I said, in terms of general legal aid. Our cases are mainly on inheritance, denial of inheritance to women and girls, issues around right land. When a woman, when like even in certain communities or cultures in Nigeria, if a man dies, the wife and children may not be able to benefit, especially for estate subject to customary laws or Islamic law. So what happened is that in this case, at times even if the man has made a will, the will can be jettisoned or challenged. So we have a lot of cases of dispute regarding to women, a woman's a possibility of a woman getting a right to land or property or inheritance. So women and girls, like in Igbo land, don't inherit customary land. And then, this is important because the land is an important means of production and access to capital. And if you deny women access to an important means of capital, then it then means that economically speaking, they will continue to be powerless. And if women are economically powerless, they will not have access to political, so it means that they will be marginalized also in power. And if women are not where power is, then it will continue to be a recurrent decimal of ineffectiveness, of disempowerment, of inequalities that will continue to exist. So that's why it is important that women have access to inheritance. So we have cases on assault, cases on rape, physical wife battery, cases around around a lot on custody of children, a lot on maintenance. People abandon families a lot, especially children. There is no law that this is another line of advocacy for me, because I've worked I've participated in pushing social advocacy that led to a number of laws across Nigeria, nationally and at state level. But this we have to focus on also law around custody, because custody always a man seems to take custody without regard to the woman, and again, importantly again, they don't even when they don't give the woman maintenance, and even the children are not being properly maintained, and we have to think of the best interest of the child. So we do a lot of cases around that. So in a year, for example, we have about 2,000 cases. Sometimes we have over 3,000 drop-ins, and then we don't provide for those who can afford. So we use the means test. If you can afford and we feel that you're economically empowered, then we'll not be able to handle that the case. So with the TAMASAC, we focus specifically on victims of sexual violence. And within 3 years, within a small community metropolis, we were able to assist 647 cases within 2 years. These are people who earlier on would not have, to broken the silence, would not have been able to report their victimization because of stigma, because of blaming the victim. We were able to say, break the silence, break the culture of silence. We started intensive advocacy, community advocacy. We use the media to tell people you're not to be blamed if you're raped. And people started reporting. So nowadays you feel people are, not that we are there yet, but at least the confidence is there because they know there is a support system. Because if you don't have a support system, then you can't, when they said report, they report to where? And then what happens? Who provide redress? So with TAMASAC, what we are doing was international best practice, comprehensively providing free legal aid, medical first, and then immediately they report. If it's within 3 days, 72 hours, you do prophylaxis. They do the counseling, psychosocial support, continue visitation, come back. So it's integrated best practice, confidential, quality service. So integrated, confidential, quality service that includes medical, legal, psychosocial, counseling, and continuing support. So all of this work are going on. We have lawyers, we have big pro bono scheme, and it's going on daily basis, and people are doing amazing work. On daily basis, listening to these cases can be traumatizing. I know when I used to be in the clinic more, but now of course my work is a lot global. I'm not there every day. There are people who are working in my organization every day. It is traumatizing. There are times I think of how do we protect both the human rights defenders, how do we also provide them the psychological healing as well, because they too listening to this are traumatized. Less than 2 weeks ago I had an emergency call, and it was a baby of 14 months or 15 thereabout who was defiled by a man. And then I had to, run around, take her to medical because it was a weekend, and then the office wasn't open. But we do have hotlines. I have to, and the person to deal with it lost someone, so I had to immediately, and I was just coming from a travel. I said, no, this is a dear situation. I have to get them to hospital, call the doctor, and the doctor had to travel from the village back to look after them, and then also get the police involved immediately. And luckily, the police the next day was able to effect arrest, and they still awaiting trial. So at least if you don't respond like that, sometimes my time is not my time. I have to combine all of this with my administrative work in university, blending that one with the scholarship work, the scholarly work I'm doing, and then again the activism is quite demanding. And then so when I describe myself as I'm a feminist, I'm a feminist activist scholar, but importantly also I said that it's really a journey from local to global, because I've told you how I started from the what transpired in my village with my mother as a widow made me to dream big dreams of defending people's rights, and then especially women. And then from there to what I'm doing, then to the global world. In 2008, I was appointed United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking. If you're UN by the Human Rights Council, which is also within the UN system, how human rights are promoted through the system of UN, especially in ensuring accountability. So as part of accountability mechanism, we have what we call special procedures in order to have independent experts be in charge of certain subjects, certain thematic focus, and they can report directly to United Nations, undertake country missions on behalf of United Nations, do communications, and then work to protect the victims of right violation. So I was, appointed to this position, a very competitive position at the end of the day. And I was like, when I was nominated, and then I had the finally I'm the finalist, and then I was appointed. I said, what? That was a big task. Doing that, I traveled, and since, globally, I've traveled to over 130 countries. During that, my mandate, I traveled to over 100 countries. Not just for 6 years. I had the first 3 years, and in 2008, and it was renewed. Normally, you don't do more than 2 tenures. So I had 2 tenures of 6 years fully working on this subject around the world. And why human trafficking is a thematic focus, and is part of my work was to write thematic reports. These are expert reports on the subject, and I dealt with every aspect of human trafficking, about the causes and the consequences, the root causes, the push and pull factor, the demand that drives it, the issue of prevention. What action do we do to prevent? What are the forms of trafficking that we need to focus on? The labor aspect, or the sexual trafficking in the sex industry, or the slavery part of it, the servitude, that other manifestation and exploitative how do you show even that organ trafficking? So I did all kinds of thematic expert report in those fields. And within that, I saw, that's why I just said the world is is an ugly phenomenon. And trafficking affects every country of the world, whether as a transit, as a source country that is sending, or as a transit country, or as a destination country. If you find that the countries, even though it affects country in different, it knows no border, and it's modern day slavery, and it's still going on. Yes, of course, before then I knew about human trafficking. We had worked, WACOL has actually worked on the subject and have even documented and researched, because through WACOL research on the issue of focusing on domestic trafficking. So we've worked on it, we've researched on it, and we've researched on issue of torture, because under WACOL we do also a lot of publications, to inform the people about their right, legal education. But then I did not know the quantum of external dimension, that is the international trafficking. Because trafficking is, you have international trafficking, you have the internal trafficking. But the external trafficking, the international one, is also huge and knows no border. Even in Nigeria is affected as a sending or source country, is also a major transit country, is also a destination country, all in one. And if you look at Africa, Nigeria is one of the top countries where it's affected. If you're looking at the world, Southeast Asia, followed by Africa. So within that, apart from the official UN mission that I conducted in almost every region of the world, I did UN official mission. It also gave me opportunity to meet with thousands of victims and to advocate for right to effective remedies and come up with a draft basic principles on right to effective remedy for victims of trafficking. So it is and the work and my concern was mainly, let us place human rights at every intervention to combat human trafficking. And I developed like 11 pillars for fighting human trafficking, 11 pillars around 5 P's, 3 R's, and 3 C's. The 5 P's was dealing with protection, prevention, prosecution, promotion of the partnership that is important, and of course punishment, because lack of accountability is a major problem while trafficking continue unabated. Because if people like, if it's not a high risk business and people know they can traffic people, sell them, so they are into slavery, people are sold into slavery every day, trading in human beings, and no accountability, they get away with it, then they continue to do that. So we need to make it a high risk business, low profit one, in order to stamp out this ugly phenomenon. So the 5 P's will target on this comprehensively, deal with prevention, dealt with that, then deal with the issue of the 3 R's: redress, rehabilitation or recovery, and reintegration, particularly focusing on victims. And that's where I did a lot of advocacy for effective remedy, which will include compensation, restitution, satisfaction, guarantee of non-repetition for victims, because victims, of course, don't get opportunity because they are in foreign countries. What usually happens is that once people are trafficked, even if at times they are not even identified as trafficked persons, they will be identified as irregular or illegal migrants, in quote, we call it more. And then they are arrested and deported, put in migrant detention camp and deported back to their country. No possibility of even getting remedy, of getting compensation. And then the traffickers will get away with it. Those who have exploited them, including their labor and their services, or who have trafficked or enslaved them, will get away with that exploitation. I said, no, countries must put in place measures to do early identification and detection. And once a person identified as a trafficked person, there should be non-punishment approach. You should not punish the person. The approach to take must be victim-centered, human rights-centered, in order to provide real succor to the victims. Because globalization, one of the markers is migration. And then migration, trafficking is migration gone wrong. But sometimes people out of poverty or gender discrimination, inequalities, conflict, livelihood challenges want to move. For people don't move just like that. They want to find greener pasture. They are escaping even violence. They are also escaping gender inequalities. They are also being pushed by families, who exploit, especially for the cases of women and girls. They are exploited in order to provide for the rest of the family. So if people when they are desperate like that, they are also in a vulnerable position, and somebody makes an offer. Oh, offer for this, and they take the offer. Some of them, they wouldn't know is a trap. I've seen a girl, for example, from Colombia, who was just in this era of e-ticket, electronic ticket, e-visa, and then just landed in Dubai and was enslaved for next 3 years. If not for police intervention of something else, and where she was found accidentally, nobody would have known where she was, and some people have died or disappeared forever because of this type of thing. I've seen people trafficked to fishery boats, and then they were even people hear about people being thrown overboard, and I've seen some other survivors who told me they have witnessed people being thrown overboard if they are sick, or if they protest too much. Otherwise, you just stay work for 2 years, they can bring you put you offshore again, and then so a lot of things happen in the world. It's not it's heartbreaking to have witnessed this firsthand, but I'm glad that at global level that we can make the impact we made, especially with the human trafficking. In 2013 I was honored by Newsweek, Daily Beast, as one of the women of impact in the world, and within the 125 women named in 2013, I was one of them. And I went to New York, and they had and then in the podium in New York, I recall sharing the podium with a woman who lost her daughter to traffickers. And hasn't found closure, because up till now she doesn't know what happened to her daughter. So it is from Argentina. I mean, I've been to mission in some of these countries: Argentina, Uruguay, Bahamas, Belize, Morocco, Egypt, Thailand, Australia, Japan. So I've gone round the world, looking at these issues, and then the intersection of it, and then the issue of human rights, and also the gender inequalities that also fuel some of these practices and violations of human rights of women. That's why I conclude always that it is important that sometimes we don't get the feedback we need from some of this field work, and then to classrooms, and then also from classroom to scholarship to put it in a so, and this is part of why I've been in a unique position.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask that question. You know that I was going to ask you what you see as the relationship between feminist scholarship and activism.
Yeah. So because I'm doing feminism already, so I'm doing feminism, and then the scholarship, I see also that feminism and feminist work is also one closer to scholarship, because the work they are doing already, sort of translates or amounts to that. And with my work, it was because I'm already, doing scholarship. I'm already an activist, and then, I'm an activist. I would have actually left even teaching, for example, or being in the classroom long ago to focus primarily and exclusively only in my activist work. But then when I just noticed that, I found that it's an interesting, intersection, and that is important that I continue this, not just teaching, also writing, and then using my field experiences, and then giving account of that. I've had contributions I've made, and people say, "Wow, this is really different paper, or refreshingly different, and shows that you are really on ground or in the field, and you're bringing other perspectives that probably as mere scholars who doesn't have opportunity of that, people will never have known." So and that, I think, is what you can call making impact, even through one's writing. Yeah,
it's very interesting and very important work too. But as you reflect on your work, and I know we're just like talking and broadly about all of the issues, but for you, what do you understand by feminism? What is feminism?
For me, feminism is equal worth between men and women. Equal worth.
Okay.
Not just equal worth, and that means both dignity and rights. Okay. Equal worth. You have to, human beings, equal worth. That a woman has equal worth, both in terms of right, dignity, personhood, as her male counterpart, period.
Okay. And what has that meant for your work?
What it's meant that for me, I have no barrier. I've set out my goals, and I've achieved all that I wanted to achieve. Nobody could have told me as a woman, no, you can't be a professor of law. I'm a professor of law in a very premier university. I'm a dean of law in my law school. I've served in various capacity, heads of department. I continue to serve. I've reached that global level. I've worked and reported to both UN General Assembly and then Human Rights Council in Geneva and General Assembly in New York. I've talking to all the countries of the world, going around the world, meeting heads of state. It meant that I have the ability, I have the agency. Nobody set and placed that glass ceiling, for me. So, and I was just strong, but yes, that's me, that I've succeeded. But I'm also mindful that there are also other women and girls that not only need that push in order to realize their full potential because of the barriers they face, but again, to continue to push the envelope for the issue of to continue to push and put on the national front burner of national, international discussion issues around gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, because that is very crucial. Why does gender disparity persist? We have the social patriarchy, social norms, stereotypes in every aspect, including, if you look at judicial even stereotypes. How the world and our communities continue to produce and reproduce this stereotype that reinforces gender inequalities? How do we challenge that? How do we bargain in a constructive manner this patriarchy without saying we're throwing our culture away, but without also succumbing to cultural relativist theory or relativism that will not accept universal human rights? Because we know universal human rights is for the enjoyment of men, women, boys, girls, period. And I will not accept of any difference between a man and a woman, except as relate to biological differences. But those biological differences wouldn't mean acceptance of construction of gender bias or gender bias policies and roles, except if it is sensitive to the needs of each group because of those biological differences, but not to create inequalities or inequities, or to put limits or place false dichotomies between the public and the private spheres, and then limiting women's role, for example, as reproductive or as one that should be in the domestic sphere, and then having the good women, bad women, and feminists or radical. I don't think also is about, we've gone beyond the issue of radical feminism. If I describe myself as a feminist, it doesn't mean I want to throw away my brow, I don't want to have a family, or I don't want a husband, or I don't want children. No. One of the things we've been able to do, especially for African feminists, and this is where we are different from African feminism and Western feminism, for example, because we have to think of outside Western metaphysical framework. If you say I'm African feminist, yes, we believe in duality. And then I have a family, and I have a husband. Yes, but we're also constructing new roles and new partnership and gender roles, which include that I have to work. I have to recognize and respect my space. And if you're not able, then maybe we'll also not be partners. And that is partnership that we're doing. And we're redefining all of those roles. And it's working. And without making it just all about sexualized discussion of men and women. Because if we are African feminists, we realize also what are the impediments or the roadblocks, and then how this can be overcome, and what we need to prioritize even as we are promoting human rights. Because we are still talking about basic human rights in Africa. Right to life is abrogated every day. When women die from pregnancy that is not a disease, women should have right to safe motherhood as of right, because society ought to treat even reproduction and reproductive role of women as a social function. But are they doing so? What help? Women pay so much even to have a baby that is supposed to help in reproducing society. How do we begin to deconstruct and break these barriers and meet around the womanhood, and then treating women as a person with full legal personality under the law? So it's not easy, but I think take for example Nigerian women. We have women who have succeeded in different aspects, but you see that politically women are still marginalized, economically women are still marginalized, and that also results in a failure of women to occupy strategic decision where they can also influence the law in their favor. So it's not easy, but we have to. And of course, once you say you're a feminist in our environment, people look at you again and I say, okay, you're a feminist, so what you want is LGBT rights. I mean, so they just place your own worldview based on that, their understanding. And this is also from perspective of call it maybe pioneer feminist group in the Western world. But these days also, I try to see myself as more as an African feminist, but I'm a feminist without any if or but. Yes, but I don't want to be said, okay, if you're a feminist, all the pejorative terms that feminism mean no marriage, no family, no children. So, I mean, for some, that's how they look at it.
Wow.
Are you a feminist? Oh, is she married? No. How? I didn't know. So how? Are you? So that's not it. So there is a misconception, and a whole misconception. And some will because of that, some say, oh, I'm a womanist. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. But I'm a feminist because I believe in the equal worth of men and women as human beings that should enjoy equal rights, period.
Okay. Very beautifully, put together. So for that reason, I'll ask you this, one of the very last questions, what would then be the intersection of your work with the women's movement generally in Nigeria and maybe globally?
With for long, of course, I'm part of the building the women's movement in Nigeria, or part of it. The first there have been we have National Council of Women Societies, but the first feminist women's group was Women in Nigeria, and it was formed following the first ever conference on women in Nigeria that was convoked then at ABU in 1985. And then under military regime, it played active role, which is also another part of my work that I didn't have time to say, but it also started, I was part of pro-democracy movement. I recall I was just telling them experience during the Abacha time that I had to even stay in London, work with Human Rights Watch and all of that as an intern. And so the issue for me, the movement, we have a women's rights movement. We are not homogeneous in Nigeria, even as women's group. The culture and religion impact a lot and create differences amongst women's group, and also impact on women's ability to speak with one voice and condemn maybe a cultural practice or harmful traditional practice. Take, for example, issues like maybe early marriage or female genital mutilation. You won't find women who will know it's acceptable in my culture for child marriage, and they wouldn't be forceful, even though they identify themselves as activists or feminists. You can't hear them publicly speaking against this, and this is so divisive in Nigeria. And I think it's about time that we see our differences as a political resource, that there are common grounds that we can use and build upon, instead of allowing men to and social norms and patriarchy to continue to divide the movement. So we have women's group, we have women's movement. It might not be as strong as we wish, but it continue to grow, and we'll continue to invest in this area. Globally, I've been part and parcel of all the things that are happening around the world in terms of women's movement, and then I've been following through on that. But I think it must start closest to home, and that's where we are. And,
maybe in maybe 2 minutes, can you kind of do an evaluation of your expectations of the development of feminism in Nigeria?
I think there is the consciousness. The feminism, has also come of age in Nigeria, but again, in the same breath, I can say is also emerging or evolving, or is at infancy, because there are different understanding of what we mean by feminism, and we need to begin to do that clarification, because there are many who don't want to identify themselves as feminists because of those pejoratives terms that have been used or feminists are seen to be, and we need to build confidence of them. We need to make them understand. And there are people asking question: is it correct? Can men be defined? Can you say a man is a feminist? Can men do feminism? Which I think yes, men can also do feminism. Under what space, or do we need exclusive space? But then you find this is where issues, our particularities as Africans will begin to come in. What sort of spaces are available for our discussion, for our, for us to evolve, for this to evolve, and for us to continue to shape this ideology. And in doing that, we may have to also be able to navigate the cultural, and then also to build partnership, also even with men who are progressive. Why not? That is also important, and that is part of our duality. And I think if we bring men effectively in, progressive men, not all men, then we're going to succeed. And I think in Nigeria there is a need, of course, to prioritize. And so most of the things that divide us, there are areas there where women agree, and then maybe we begin to work more on the areas where we have common voice, because we need all the voices across all the ethnic and religious group in order to achieve the kind of, or make the kind of progress that we want to make. And we still have problems with the laws, both inadequacy and also lack of implementation of the ones that is existing, and we have to continue to build that solidarity, accountability, advocacy, sisterhood. They are all important in the kind of feminism we want to see. And then also being culturally sensitive. I don't subscribe to cultural relative position that reject universal human rights.
All right. Then two more questions. One would be a small, maybe a short response to about 2 minutes, which is, I wanted you to speak a little about your work on the African Feminist Network, something like that. There's
the Africa, is it because we have is it the African women? There is African women. Okay, I was part of the African. Is it African feminist movement or African feminist?
Movement, and then I know that there's a big organization, and then
there's a women in Africa and Africa in the diaspora. That's one. There is also the African Feminist Forum.
Yeah.
Yes, I can this still be recording? Is that?
That's yeah.
Okay. There is also the African Feminists. What we've done, because we have even a WAWORC. I remember being part of the foundation of that coalition, West African Women's Rights Coalition, which was also around trying to galvanize common voices and building bridges for women to advocate for realization of women's human rights in West Africa. The African Feminist Forum was also like that, and through that we're all grappling with the leadership challenge in Africa and development of and constitutionalism in Africa, and then all the other issues. Is still, it was a major breakthrough. Femnet is still going on. We're all still part of the network coordinated from Nairobi. And I think African women are doing particularly well, given all the challenges we have. And then we have also the link to the global, with the Commission on the Status of Women that comes up every year. Now you see a forum that even African women gather, and they're able to discuss with their sisters in not just from diaspora, from around the world. Okay. So it's really it's quite interesting.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to have all those interplay. But then we need to we have really forces, especially men. They are not very happy that women are organizing. And then
and then one other thing I wanted you to speak to. We have just like 2 minutes left, and it's on global climate change and women.
What we know, there is a problem of gender and climate change, and gender and climate change, not much attention has been paid in this area. And then and we have to pay attention, because women are the one closest to environment, and you can't be talking about environmental issues without women. If you look in our environment, what do women do? Women they are the first to manage the waste management. They are child rearers and child bearers and child rearers. Every day they are dealing with child stools, everything, managing, even in villages where they still don't have diaper. They are the ones who deal with that. They are the ones who deal with the family waste. They are the ones who cook. They are the ones who have to fetch water. They fetch firewood, sanitation, water. They are dealing with those issues. So women are closer. Who are the farmers? Who are the ones that face the food security challenges? They are all women. And if women are doing all of this and given their role, they still don't have a voice, and the issues are not covered, and they're not on the table for climate change discussion. So we have to talk about participation. Participation right for women. Women have to be on the table where these issues are discussed, because it affects them. Women have to be given greater voice. They have to be given the tools to adapt to climate changes. So adaptation is very important. They have to also be given the resources, the new technologies, in order to adapt. They are all part of it. If a woman is a farmer, for example, and then they have a suffer famine, or there is a particular climate change effect on, how do they get the information that will give them improved crops or resistant to this because of climate? So we need to provide that. And if you look at, for African women, and even in Nigeria, it's double digit in terms of digital divide, between men and women. And then for women who are farmers, and women don't own the land that they cultivate. So we have to still talk about ownership of land, access to important means of production. How do you give women not just farming rights? How do they own the land that they farm? Otherwise they farm and someone come and uproot their crops overnight because they feel they don't have ownership, even if it was farmed by their husband or their late father. they feel they don't have. So we need to put all of that into perspective so that when we begin to make laws, whether at international or national level, they are still not sensitive to gender issues. And there are gender particular issues with regard to climate change and environment that we must address.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.